Previously on Lost.
Jason?
Yes, sir.
No.
It's the hitting the center stand bracket,
Oh, come on.
which means it ain't coming out all the way. You've got a barrier to completion, Holmes.
I think this is the very first install video we've ever done that we have not been able to complete. And I'm going to write to Martin and Jeremy or give them a call at AltRider. AltRider, we have a problem.
Photo adventures on the road.
Chris and Jason, how are you?
Hi, how are you guys?
Good, real good. I'm just finishing leaving the dealership, and I'll be pulling in 1 minute here. But we had an opportunity to do some filming with that BMW 1300. What a ridiculous piece of equipment! Honestly, they did an amazing job with that thing. How are you guys doing?
All right, well, you can't miss an opportunity to take a chance to film something, right?
I know, yeah, with this social media world that we have to participate in, you got to feed that beast, which is, I'm not very good at it, man. We just make good parts, not the social media.
We fake it as we go.
Have you had a chance to play with the new 900?
You know, that's so funny because I just sat there and talked with the general manager and had a whole long conversation with Sean Thomas last night about that bike. And I would have thought it was going to take some time for it to get out of the shadows of the 850, given the poor launch of that bike several years ago. And holy cow, it's actually just bested the dual sport over 600 cc's as of right now. It's the top selling unit. So I myself personally have not spent time on it, but now this, because there was another social media guy who I was just talking to who has that bike right now and was explaining how impressive it is. So I'm like, man, I was just talking to the engineering team. We got to reshuffle the prod dev schedule, which is like, you know, we don't have unlimited resources, but man, we need to jump on that thing after we first validate that those sales numbers are really happening. Because that thing's making a lot of noise, a lot of attention.
Yeah. Well, what I'd heard was, of course, you know, the 800 was such a dud because it was so heavy and underpowered, and people are just freaking out about how good this 900 is that, you know, BMW listened and actually got it right.
Yeah. Well, when you said 800, you mean 850, or you still say
850.
Yeah.
Sorry, same.
And ultimately, that's a complicated scenario. There was a lot of things that contributed to the problems of the launch of the 850, which didn't help that the 1250 had launched just right before it, and that price point was not a significant deviation from where the 850 was. And that bike, literally, they launched it 3 months later in the shadows of the 1250, the first water cooled. So I mean, there's so many reasons that hurt that 850. Besides that, the industry was finally trending towards those middle lightweights. And that 850 was like left in no man's land going this direction. So it's interesting to see how well the 900 is doing. But in the interim, right, so that Ducati Desert X had kind of built and established this. Now we have like 600 cc, 900, and now 1300. It's such a, as Sean and I were saying, it used to be so much fun when it was just a niche because it was small and there was just a few of us and we actually all knew each other and we were having a blast. And now it's like, holy shit, there's so many players involved.
Yep, well, now you're paralyzed by choice when you go shopping.
Yeah, which is not a bad thing, right? But yeah, as far as running a little brand, trying to do protection, holy cow, every time we look left or right, it's like, well, I'd never even heard of that brand. And they're just popping up, you know, a lot of little Eastern European brands and then the stuff coming out of China, you know, it's all going to be real and continue to grow. And so where you may laugh at what sounds like a silly name of a brand, sometimes people laugh at Happy Trail's been around forever, but some of these like little mom and pop operations, you're like, oh, that's not really an impact to the business. And it's like, actually, it's problematic because collectively, all of those small, insignificant brands are collectively adding up to a sizable chunk of market share. And you don't think like Tuareg or SW Motek is go shit. Add all those little players in, and you've got a hit to your marketplace that's that big, but it's hard to see.
Yep, that's true.
And you being so that's a great segue to tell us a little bit about how the inspiration came about for AltRider.
Yeah, it's funny because I don't not tell the story. I don't lie or not tell a story. But ultimately, I started working at Tourtech. I met the U.S. owner, and he's a great guy to ride with, another guy to work for, that's for sure. But it was a great space for a guy who was very young. I wasn't very smart, but very young, at a place that was literally growing 50% over 50%, not due to any marketing brilliance, not due to anything other than amazing timing to the market, right? You got to think back then, that's when Long Way Round, Long Way Down had just started getting traction. And we all know that was the faux pas of the century when KTM said, we're going to pass. And holy shit, BMW could not have ever anticipated the traction, and the future beholds itself. So that little organization that was Tourtech, I got in there and was able to ultimately become VP and run the organization just because it was growing. I mean, it was just growing so fast. And you know that, like, hey, what better place to be is one that is growing so much, and you will get an opportunity. So learned a tremendous amount of what worked, more importantly, what wasn't working, especially working with the Germans, right? There is no dialogue. Das not for discussion. End of discussion was oftentimes dialogue. And
Wow.
oftentimes it was like, gentlemen, this is not a suggestion. This is a litigious society. That's why you guys gave the entire distributorship up and are desperate to keep this thing going, because you're afraid of America, but need this marketplace. This is not a suggestion. Your product is having a problem. I distinctly remember the 950 high fender system. They used dirt bike fork leg guards, as many brands still do to this day, because when you get rid of that fender, it always has an integrated fork leg guards. And so nobody wants to tool up and make dedicated fork leg guards. So they take KTM dirt bike ones, but you now need to change the bracketry at the fork lugs and get that, because it's never the same bolt config. And they were using PEMs, you know what I'm saying? They're the riveted nuts that get riveted, set inside of. I have one here. But there's a minimum gauge. There's a minimum gauge material, meaning that material has to have a minimum amount of thickness for that to bite, for the swaging action. It's not riveting, but swaging. Well, it was too thin of gauge, and so guys were putting those on and spinning them right off, not realizing it. And shit, that's a moving part in a front wheel. This is not a suggestion, gentlemen. This is a problem. And so we would never get to fix it. Nothing would change. I rented space at a fabrication shop, so I literally took the inventory, took it down there, and TIG welded all of those rib nuts to the steel bracket, which was like really fine work, you know. And so and then in order to get change from the Germans, das change invoice, because of course I was the one buying the euros and paying them back. I said, so we went ahead and adjusted the invoice. I billed you out at a reasonable welding rate at $40 an hour. You know, nowadays, my gosh, $120 an hour. And then that's when you affect change, is only when the payment was modified, is when we finally started to see.
You finally touched the bottom line.
Yeah. So then to roll that all the way forward to like a full statement, it was like, look, it's not my business. There was an American gentleman, very smart guy, but again, great guy to ride with, different guy to work and do business with. It was never going to be my business. And then also working with the Germans, you're just not going to affect change. And even though my heart and passion is in the proper enduros, and I love the little bikes, the fat bikes or the large ADV bikes are amazing for what they can do. But my real heart passion is, I live in the Pacific Northwest. We're in the magic land, right? I grew up in Chicago, never had anything like this. You could take these little enduro bikes and go where a human hasn't walked in maybe 50 or 80 years. Oh, and by the way, we're going to touch 2 peaks today that would take you 3 months to hike to.
Right. Yeah, man. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
As I looked at the business environment to tie that all together, dirt bikes were saturated at the time. There was no way to make a business. Hell, it's hard enough making a business in this, but that was a niche that was growing, and there wasn't much there. Back in the day, we only had to beat the Germans, which was almost quite easy. Now bringing it to the earlier conversation, as you said with the segue, holy shit, there's a lot of competition out there. It's not just beat the Germans. But that's how we got started, because back then it was a growing niche, and there wasn't much in there. Especially, there wasn't even an American brand, and arguably there's still not much of an actual American brand. Hell, what is even made in America anymore?
Is that where you got the name from AltRider? Is it like an alternative choice?
You know, it was alternative, very funny, and nobody realizes it until you read those stupid business books. You go back for your little executive MBA program. It's a pain in the ass to do the naming. You're like, oh, the name is easy.
Yes, it is.
But there's so much that plays into it. There was alphanumerics for positioning. Back then, the URL was critical. You had to have a .com domain. And so the concept, all of that stuff plays in. And then the concept behind the name is, of course, you want a unique name, just like the Amazon whole case study, is that it's an alternative method to riding. North America, we sell a shitload of horsepower. We don't sell a lot of motorcycles. We are actually one of the smallest motorcycle markets. It's funny because everybody always argues with me when I do these presentations on stage. And I'm like, absolutely. We're arguably the number 1 or 2 global market, consumer marketplaces, second maybe to China, depending on what unit of measure. But as far as motorcycles, we do not sell very many motorcycles. Like, really? Yeah, that's why we don't get some of the most amazing cool bikes, like the original generation 660 Tenere, never brought to America. What the hell?
Or the original Transalp.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And that's because they're running a business and they have to amortize the homologation costs, and they know unit sales won't even get there to their break-even point, and that's how little we sell in this country. So back to the point, we sell horsepower, which is crotch rockets, and then we sell Harleys. I cannot believe the numbers are still, as I look at these to this day, we sell very unimpressive, very disappointing Harleys, these hogs. And so an alternative mode of transportation is adventure riding. It's a much safer way. You can react to traffic. We all know that the highest cause of all the motorcycle accidents is always the car pulling out in front of you. If you're not in the right body position to react to that, that's a huge one. Then the other is the multifunctionality of an adventure bike. It's almost a Swiss Army knife. You can always pick up something on your way home. You can't pick up anything on a crotch rocket on your way home. And so it was this alternative mode of transportation. I think America still to this day for very much needs education on a multiple facets when we talk about motorcycles, not just about what to buy, but how to ride. And that's because we have no motorcycle culture. We have free subsidized gasoline, unlimited parking. And so your daughter or wife certainly doesn't ride a motorcycle. Whereas, of course, in emerging marketplaces, you got your whole family rides on a scooter and is very versed and incredible balance and knows how to ride. But even if you're a millionaire in Munich in Germany, you do not have a big garage with 2 big red roll-out toolboxes. You got 1 drawer in the kitchen. That's where your tools reside. You ain't got no garage. And so for shit.
And in some countries, the entire family rides on 1 bike at the same time.
That's what I'm saying. That's why their skill sets are amazing, right? Their balance and their understanding. Awareness, and they're just incredible riders and just generally much better off. That's a whole nother thing in training as far as calibrating the intake of information into our eyes. We're so ignorant when it comes to modulating the information as it comes into our eyes. What happens when you become faster off-road? All of a sudden you're a much better rider, but then you find yourself crashing. It's a bizarre phenomenon. You've not learned to modulate your eyes and get that information in your head.
It's funny. I tell people I grew up overseas in Africa, and you'd be out in the middle of the bush where these people have nothing. The family doesn't even own a vehicle, and you come up to a river, and you got to do a water crossing, and you got to put your motorcycle on the barge, for example. And the barge operator, who is just some kid in like a tattered T-shirt and shorts and flip-flops, jumps on your bike and rides it onto the barge like it's nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how did you learn to ride a motorcycle? Your family doesn't even own a car, or it's amazing. Yeah. But here in the US, do you think part of the market in the US is growing? Like, is the adventure market growing a little bit?
It's crazy. I'll be really honest. Of course, I was jaded for a long time because I used to really fight really hard against the industry council. It's called MIC. We spent a ton of money on this, and I would always say, look, we're just a tiny little brand, but they're giving themselves awards, pats on the back. Hey, blah, 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 look at all this success. And it's like, look, we're not even back to exceeding 2001 sales numbers. Like, what are you guys patting yourselves on the back? Oh, and by the way, all those sales that you guys are earning and so proud of, that might be that person's last purchase before their death. We have not introduced this to the youth. So what are you guys all doing? We need to get people on the motorcycle. The motorcycle itself is sustainably cool. We don't have to do a whole lot. We just got to get them on the bike. And as an industry, we don't do that. We have these satellite offices. So whether it's Honda USA, BMW USA, they're not leaders with making real decisions. There's guys that come over here to their retirement, and I got to be careful what I say because there are some good leaders actually in BMW there is right now, but they only get 4 years and then they're swapped out. So it's like, hey, don't rock the boat. How can you really execute real change? You're going to take a big, expensive, risky program that's not going to pay off for 8 years, and you're going to roll that out on your retirement years. Nah. And so here we are with what are we doing as an industry to get people on motorcycles, which was our whole call to action and doing our signature events 15 years ago when nobody wanted to do them. But that's my jaded side. Now let's go to abundance. And on the abundance side, for sure, Chris, we're seeing it grow. It is a great thing. Both the dirt bike side and of course this adventure side is almost getting saturated. They're both growing, and we're seeing some education happen where guys aren't so naively starting off on the biggest adventure bike that they can purchase. Hey man, go get some skill sets and start off on a middleweight. If you want to learn how to race, if you had unlimited budget, you don't start with a $100,000 Porsche. You start with a go-kart, and that way you can get the body English and start to understand all of this teaching that's being given you. You got to be able to feel it and make it muscle memory. You got to start in a go-kart, not in a $100,000 Porsche. And every badass best MotoGP racer is and was originally a dirt bike rider, 100%.
Over the past decade, I got into ADV riding just going on 5 years ago when I hooked up with this yokel, and got my first. It wasn't really an ADV bike; it was the V-Strom, 2011 650. So I started mid range, right? So I had been off a bike for 25 years. Oh, so I would assume that over the past decade, the shift in American motorcycling has started to move away from what you were saying, which is horsepower, to ADV. Have you been able to track what's been going on over the years in relationship to your business and in comparison to the rest of the world?
That's a great question, Jason. And I hate when people answer things when they don't know what the hell they're talking about. I don't have any data on that. And I think, so I don't know, but I think up until just recently, I would have agreed 100% holistically with your statement. But I think we are finally seeing a migration and an eyes opening and like, wait, I don't want a femur bone breaker. Maybe I don't quite need the biggest motorcycle that I can purchase, which is what America buys. We need it. Yeah, bigger. In the adventure models, they couldn't sell those adventure models anywhere. Meaning when they were first rolled out as a package, right? BMW was the smartest first guys to do it. Now everybody does it, right? Honda has the Adventure Sports, right? They're all giving you this big package. Twice the fuel range. What are you talking about? Where is there not a gas station? You live in North America. Whenever would you ever need that? And everybody wants the oversized tank. And now you're riding with. So originally when those were rolled out, they never sold well, and they only sold in America. Now they're actually exceeding the standard model sales. But to go back to your original question, Jason, I think we're finally starting to see a bit of a transition. We're seeing middleweights come out that are actually doing well and receive well instead of being the daughter bike or the little bike. No, they're respected for what they are, which is a way more capable off-road bike. And we're finally seeing Japan finally wake up, right? They never made a street legal dual sport. They had one or two, they dabbled, they didn't care. They had not evolved their enduro bikes and put a 6-speed transmission in. For decades, we're finally seeing them react and respond to KTM, who got to take that market in its entirety because they weren't reacting and making street legal dual sports. So we are starting to see some transition and getting more people on bikes and people looking to not get and purchase the biggest thing that they can. Though, Jason, we can all just say, well, didn't they just roll out a 1300? Did we really need a bigger motorcycle? Yep, got to have bigger. What the hell?
Well, I suppose in this particular case, my question does kind of ignore the fact that geography and where you live kind of picks your bike for you. So in all of the Asian cultures, they're not going to pick the big bikes because they have small roads and tight spaces to ride and all of that kind of stuff. So geography and gas stations, but in America they're everywhere. So or you can go longer distances in America, so you need the bigger tank, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to have to play in that.
Yes, and ultimately, though, it's economics, right? A lot of those large displacement bikes aren't even imported into those countries, even though they're made in that country, right? So in Japan, a lot of the large
sure,
they're manufactured there, but not available for sale. So crazy stuff that it's funny how Americans just don't ever really realize there's more going on than just America.
Well, that's fair.
Well, so we told you, I guess, to jump into our issue. Part of why we were calling is we figured out in installing the variable height suspension that we have to remove the T-Rex. At least we think. And Martin was great. He sent me a link to the T-Rex installation for the center stand. But any tips or recommendations or advice for people who are installing that?
Yeah.
As far-
So the one thing, of course, is get the bike unladen, right? So your swing arm is free, and there's several different ways. Surprisingly, although I don't know if I would actually say that that bike would support itself on a good quality 5-gallon bucket. Maybe, but I don't actually definitively know that. But it's funny because riding out in the bush or in the real world, you start to realize there's a lot of very creative ways on how to do a tire change when you get a flat tire. So look around yourself, get innovative and get creative. Sadly, most of the guys are just to pull right in and they've got bike lifts. And now with Harbor Freight making stuff so affordable, even their ATV, that double rack one that I think we even use in one of our videos, is hard to argue with the price and how well it works. But getting that thing unladen makes everything else super easy. And I really want to drive that home because the success of those lowering links, or let's say fully adjustable links, has driven us to make these for more and more and more motorcycles. And it's funny though, because the dirt bike side is only catching on so much, which is my heart and passion and love. And I'm like, you tell me, and I've been lucky enough to actually get to go ride with Graham Jarvis, some of the world's best hard enduro guys, and the hard enduro stuff is now more popular than ever. But I'll tell you, very few of us have those incredible skill sets like a Graham Jarvis. But with the practice, we get better. But if I'm practicing on a bike that's super tall, right? You guys have all sat on proper enduro bikes. So I don't care if you're 6'2", you could use a 1-inch or 2-inch reduction while you're training, while you're learning. Because to do the big stand-up pirouettes and to start to do that practice, it's intimidating as hell, because as soon as the bike's starting to lean over and you try to put a leg out, if you shorten your seat height by 1 inch, now you're able to start and catch the bike upwards of 7 to 15 degrees earlier. If I catch the bike here, no problem. If I catch the bike here, oh shit, not only am I probably not strong enough to catch it, it's going to maybe even hurt me. So lowering your bike is such a great training tool, but there's a bit of a machismo factor, I think, that's involved. Lower my dirt bike, I ride a dirt bike. And I'm like, I'm trying to really get this educational piece out that, look, man, some of the best enduro guys, hard enduro guys, will lower their bike. They're going to run the seat concepts, short seat. And that's because you need to have the dab when you're doing all these aggressive rides. And you definitely need to have access when you're training and trying to learn. And so to tie it back to this, you asking me about this thing, I want to bring that up because it's fully adjustable. Once you've installed it, to make that adjustment, you only ever got to just loosen that last pivot bolt and then swap those inserts. And what people don't realize is that when the Works editions and full factory race bikes, they come to racetracks with a briefcase of inserts, and they play with the what's called a pull rod, because it not just lowers your bike. The pull rod, and the whole point of linkage, is it's a mechanical advantage against the shock, and it gives you a progressive feel. So by playing with it has a huge impact to how the bike's going to perform on the racetrack. And they bring many, many different inserts that do subtle little differences. I'm not talking about getting that into it, but what I'm trying to say is, look, man, pro guys do this, and they do it for a reason. And so for that sort of price point, plus now you get linkage protection, which you've got to put something underneath of there. You're just going to pound that piece of aluminum and ultimately do damage, irreparable damage to your entire shock body, which will get to the point where the bearing will no longer flow. You're going to have stiction and all sorts of major problems. So you need to have the linkage guard anyways, and by machining it out of one block of plastic, and I should actually have that, instead of doing, how ironic, here it is right here, instead of just doing a cold formed UHW, the problem with a cold formed piece of plastic is, dude, you go to actually try to back up and you're going to hang up and catch on all sorts of activities. And that's why doing it out of an entire billet piece, which is expensive, but it's the right way to make the linkage guard. It's got that roll back, and it's lubricious, so that means it will slip and get over that. It's a huge difference. Look, I used to do the enduro cross races, and always at the hard obstacles, what's called the matrix, you look down and there's a pile of these broken. They're sitting at the obstacle because you had to reverse and get another approach on it. So it's a subtle little detail, but it's the right thing to do.
I don't know, but I'm going to add lubricious to my electrician. I like that one a lot.
Lubricious. It's a beautiful product. It's nicely made. I'm super impressed. But as you were saying earlier, so you already have the needle bearings and everything installed. So this is great. But then once you put the pieces in, all you have to do to make the adjustment is move the rear linkage bolt.
Correct. And getting people to like really experiment with that is really my point. And truly calling or treating it like a training aid. Get that bike down, get your confidence up, and go start to explore. And you know what I really say, the main one? Like, remember when you were first riding a dirt bike and you're riding single track and you're like, oh shit, the trail ends or peters out or whatever reason, you got to turn around. You try to turn a bike around, if you don't know the technique, you are going to use up so much energy trying to yank a bike around and turn around. If you have that seat height down a full inch and you can take that step and use the motor to let it just spin that bike right around, dude, that is a huge game changer. Because guess what? At the next trail, you're going to have to turn around again. So you need to know how to
goes
be able
back
to
to
do
that lean angle that you were talking about.
Yes, dude. So we actually, I was just working on a video where we're trying to really teach that, because that's a basic skill set but you got to have confidence to start to practice that. And so get my seat height down, take that big step and spin that bike around. Then after you have that confidence, now you can start to flirt with and play with the pirouette where you truly stand it up and do that. Ultimately, when you get that technique down, gentlemen, it's no energy. Graham Jarvis is not a master athlete. He's a master technician. It's all technique, not about strength. Graham Jarvis is a skinny old man who kicked the world's best at hard enduro because of technique.
Nice. Nice.
See, there's hope for us old guys.
Well, good, because that's all I got at the moment.
Doing the flip turn, that's for younger kids. Very cool. That's awesome. So that will help. As I mentioned, Martin sent me the link to the T-Rex racing, and I will tell you, the viewers jumped on our part 1 video when you may have seen where we kind of stumbled onto a hard stop where we were trying to figure out, okay, what do we do here? And they told us that you can actually remove the front pivot bolt with the Aprilia Tuareg center stand. So it's not a problem with the Aprilia, it's just a problem with the T-Rex racing stand. Apparently the side flanges that the center stand attaches to come down a little bit lower, and they impede the ability for that front linkage bolt to come all the way out. Yeah. So we will tell Martin, thank you. We appreciated that research that he did that was going above and beyond for customer service. We appreciated that. And of course, for you coming and talking to us, that is going to be very helpful as well. So we'll be able to finish part 2. I did want to ask you though, where in the world did you find Lindell?
Oh, that's a funny story that we tell inside of the company, and we make a joke, but it's very true. And it is ask and ye shall receive, right? You just never know. You're on the phone with somebody and ask, and you find out that, hey, it's the marketing director for Toyota, and they're doing a big video photo shoot for the brand new TRD Tacoma. You just don't know if you don't ask. So my goodness, 6+ years ago, our one of our customer service gals was moving with her husband, and so we needed to fill the position. And it's hard to find good people, man. That is probably the #1 nemesis to running a business and being successful. It's not the idea. The idea is the easy part, man. Good people and finding them and then keeping them. So I actually asked a gentleman who I had helped me out 15 years ago when I wrote the code, the database, the back end, the ERP. A very smart gentleman, ran his own business. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, man, who was your best employee? And any chance they're still in Washington State, and any chance in hell they're actually looking for a job? And he actually said, and this is not making this up, he had said, that's Lindell, but let me go find out and see what her status is, and I'll get back to you. And that is the story. And we still tell this today with like new hires and say, hey, look, that's how we reiterate the statement about ask and you shall receive, what we call genuine curiosity. If you don't ask those questions, whether in product design or people or marketing or who knows what, man. I literally was just dropping the Tuareg off at the local shop here on Thursday or something, and I know they opened till 6, and it was like a rush to get there, and it was closed. And I'm like, "Why what? Oh man, it's gonna be a pain in the ass for me." But there was a bike running in the back, I could hear it, and a guy putting his helmet on. So I cruised over there in the truck and just said, "Hey, do you work there?" And if I would have asked, it would have been a whole nightmare because, of course, the shop's not closed. But by asking him, he's like, "Oh yeah, they did say you were, the other guys were closing up early." But if I didn't ask, it would have. I mean, that's just such a simple example. That was just this week or last week. You got to create that genuine curiosity. But that is the story of how we found Lindell, who is tough as nails, awesome, super hard worker, and just, skilled in so many different arenas.
Well, we got so many messages, direct comments and messages to us about she is a legend as far as customer
Yes.
service.
Yeah.
And of course, that's the same with all of you guys. The customer service grade, I guess you could say, for AltRider is so high in the industry, which is one of the reasons why we just, are tickled pink that we're working with you guys. And the product is amazing too. We love the products. It's like you guys built those from a place of love. You didn't just throw something together and hope that it worked. It's like you researched the heck out of it and really made it right.
Chris, I really appreciate that, and thank you for noticing. I really say, and of course I'm biased, but I really say if I could just, speaking internationally of like our European operations and other countries, people don't realize how big this country is. It is extremely difficult to market in this country. It is a very big place to carpetbag, to go and do the sales and go and visit the dealers. Because if I could just, I don't even need to tell them much. If I could just put that lowering link right next to the next lowering link option, or this crash bar next to the current market offerings, I don't really need to talk very much. We're lucky that our audience, our customer base is very educated and very discerning. I just got to get this stuff in front of them. And so it is difficult because we do make that effort that I think you're seeing and what you were commenting on. We do a lot of attention to detail that starts to stack up, even including giving you the resealable bottle of Loctite. Still to this day,
We love that.
That gives you the resealable bottle, which is not cheap, but it's the right thing to do. And you probably, of course, have the $68 bottle, the big bottle, sitting up in your toolbox, but you're not going to crawl off the ground and go get that. And so to keep you from putting your bike together incorrectly, giving you the Loctite, it's like all these little things, but getting that out to people. So super glad to have met you and be working with you. And then I do want to close on the other piece that you mentioned, which is the approachability. It was one of the founding pieces that we did. Too often in action sports, skiing, mountain biking, the people who are working in the trades, they're a little bit bitter and jaded. And you walk in and you're just like, hey, I just want to ask about the new Aprilia. And they're like, you don't know about the 660, the origins of that road racing engine and all that. No, I don't. I'm just trying to look and have you teach me. And instead of embracing and teaching, we tend to run into this industry with this ego, and because they're upset that you've got the purchasing money and they got to stay here working, and you get this kind of flack and this attitude instead, which happens in skiing, mountain biking. The problem in motorcycling is we're already have a big barrier to entry. It's expensive. You need a separate license. It's dangerous. And oh, by the way, if you don't know what you're doing, you need a lot of support to come in and make this decision to get on one of these bikes. And so we really do, both from Lindell and everybody here at the office, whether it's customer service or it's teaching you and sharing with you about tricks and those techniques to make this experience a lot more enjoyable. Because without them, a lot of people are like, this whole idea of riding off-road is absolutely horrible. And they have this one or two experiences, they get injured, and they immediately sell their stuff, and they're like never to be visited again.
Right.
Yep.
And that's the nice thing, or the cool part about having a piece like this variable height suspension thing, is that now people of all sizes, all of us motorcycle riders are not built the same. So if we can customize our bike to fit us better, I think it's a win-win. So
You become an alternative rider.
alternative rider. All right, so we got about 3-4 minutes left on our Zoom call. Can you give us a little bit of a fun story about your 1979 Honda that you bought?
Oh,
Your Express, your very, very, very first bike, and how cool a kid you were?
Yeah, I wasn't a cool kid, but I definitely had some sort of desire for anything that was burning fossil fuel. That's for sure. Just an interesting story. I made a deal with one of the neighbors because I had been eyeballing that thing laying next to a garage for many, with the vines growing through it and all the weeds for a long time. And so made a deal where I did a certain amount of yard work. In exchange, I got to have the scooter, which of course I had to carry the thing home because the drum brakes were so seized I couldn't even drag it home. I had to carry it home, and then proceeded to take a painful, long time, naive time of tearing it all apart and then slowly putting it back together. But for sure, I no longer never needed to pedal again as a middle schooler. I always was riding under the two-stroke combustion engine and loved it. built a little rear seat, and so I had my buddies able to sit on the back seat, including in the wintertime in Chicago, hooking a rope to it and putting a sled on there, which teaches you a lot of good drift and side control. Of course, come around corners, the sled would pull you out. But because the tires were so skinny, you would go through the snowplow drifts and then send your buddy careening in the air because, of course, the sled would catch the plow drift. Even had it set up so that I could easily reach in and undo the bulbs because, of course, sometimes I'd have to cross through different parks and didn't want to be chased by the cops. So I had a way to run in a covert version. Pretty funny how many miles I put on that thing. And then finally, the chassis, the foot pegs had all bent and rolled over from jumping the thing and what have you. But yeah, that was the beginning.
It's amazing that you survived until adulthood.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you were engineering stuff even way back then as a kid, and we really appreciate the engineering and the genius that you're putting into your product. So thank you for everything, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us. We really, really appreciate it. Now, Jason has to go do some wrenching to get my problem fixed on the bike.
I'll
Awesome.
hold the camera.
Well, hey, really do appreciate you guys helping to tell the story and getting some awareness out there. And you guys come up into anything else, please reach out. We'll get you guys taken care of.
All
Thank
right,
you, man.
Thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate it.
Okay, cheers. Bye.
Next time on Survivor.
As usual, Jason, I could not have done this without your help.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. Is it gonna work?
We'll let it find out.
Ooh.